Welcome to our podcast. Now, Paul and I have done some peer assessment already and concluded that we're each hovering somewhere around an A star, but we accept that there are some limitations with peer and self-assessment. My name is Sam Deno. I've been working in secondary education and edtech for 14 years, and on this podcast I am learning along with you all about assessment, I hope. If I was 5% of a specialist when we started this, then maybe I'm about 10% now. My colleague is Paul Duffy.
So I have been in primary education for over 12 years in different sort of various roles, and assessment's played a big part of all of those, and it's exciting now being in edtech to look back and review assessment and look into the latest guidance as well. So lots of interesting stuff going on with assessment that we'll hear more about. But first, shall we hear our theme tune?
On this show, we try not to deep dive. Instead, we attempt to dive deeply into the world of assessment. Each episode, we carry out research around a particular aspect, chew it over, and then come out with some key takeaways at the end. We aim to keep these short and digestible. So let's get on with it, Paul. What have you been looking at?
So this week I've been going back to the Ofsted guidance for schools and thinking about what they're saying about assessment and really drilling down into this. And one of the things that I really wanted to highlight this week from their latest inspection handbook was this key emphasis on the extent to which leaders and staff, that's you, the teachers and support staff in the schools, understanding the limitations of assessment. So I'm going to say that we're thinking about the limitations of assessment and how we use that in a way that avoids creating this unnecessary burden. I know in previous podcasts we've talked about the fact that there is an enormous workload behind assessment, and so we're wanting to look at how we can do away with that and use it in a really effective way. So if we go right back to the kind of primary purpose, what are Ofsted saying is the primary purpose of assessment? Well, here we go. Effective assessment helps pupils to embed knowledge and use it fluently. So that's 2 points there: embed knowledge, use it fluently. And the third part is just to assist teachers in producing clear next steps for pupils. And they come with a clear warning here, which is to avoid misuse and overuse. So my aim today, have a succinct look at key assessment strategies we can use to help with those aspects. Sam,
it comes up. Yeah, it comes up time and time again, doesn't it, in the Ofsted handbook, that unnecessary burden.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's fair to suggest, actually, that with assessment, the possibilities, along with the hours involved, are absolutely endless. And probably, depending on your school or trust, there could be any number of things taking place. So just to kind of give a bit of personal context here, when I was in the classroom, I'd done assessing everything from each and every subject, in depth, marking all the books, marking a host of weekly times tables and spelling tests, assessing progress against the curriculum in every single area, creating, reviewing EHCPs, and even a new initiative was that we were going to use the Leuven scale scores, which if you're somebody who works in EYFS, you may well know this already, but it's essentially measuring children's well-being. So I was there doing all of this, measuring children's well-being, quite possibly to the detriment of my own.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think that it does sort of play into that paradox, doesn't it, of actually understanding education, understanding the science of education and pedagogy is so difficult to grasp those things when you've got the workload burden as well. And actually wouldn't it be wonderful if many of our educators could just take a step back and look at kind of what drives learning and what drives assessment.
Absolutely. And as you say, it's the workload. And I know a lot of my colleagues and I, and perhaps some of our listeners will empathise with this, actually it felt like spinning plates. You had everything going. Not only were you planning the lessons, but you were doing the marking, you were doing the assessment, and it was you were trying to carry everything at the same time, which just becomes really difficult. So I think what I'd like to do really is just take it back to its simplest form here. And Ofsted say that, really the sole aim of assessment for us as educators is to support with our teaching and not to increase our workloads. So, really we're thinking, well, is spending hours on the testing, the marking, and putting all the scores into an Excel spreadsheet actually supporting us as teachers, or is it exhausting us? And is it going to inspire our learners, or actually is it going to lead to frustration by constantly assessing what they can and can't do in a way that is perhaps not constructive for them? So I suppose that's my question.
Yeah. What approaches are there then?
So there are an absolute mass of approaches to assessment that you can take. So I'm going to apologise now if I'm saying things that you're already very aware of and using in the classroom, but I'll give a quick whistle-stop tour of sort of a few of the key ones, which I would say in kind of 4 broad groups. We've got observation, questioning, kind of written tasks, and sort of quick quizzes as well. And I want to go through some of the sort of the pros and cons to these approaches that, we can be aware of the limitations perhaps as we use these. So first off, observation, actually watching your students in action is a fantastic and really time effective and transparent way of gauging your students' level of understanding and their application in context. If you're watching them solve a maths problem or watching them construct an essay, it's very clear to see, are they able to do this without help? Are they sitting there struggling and scratching their head and need a bit of help? And are they copying the person next to them? It's a very transparent process where, you haven't let them go off and do this in isolation. You are watching this whole thing unfold in real time. However, I suppose one of the key limitations here is that if students are feeling anxious about being watched and are very clear that you're looking in their direction, actually, are they likely to show you the full extent of what they can do? Another limitation, of course, is you've got a whole class of children, so actually remembering all the things that you're seeing is going to be tricky, and you're likely to have to rely on some kind of quick scribbled notes, which actually is difficult to do with every single child and actually can lead to a bit of bias. I know I've done this before where I've come to note down at the end of a lesson how they all did, and I thought, oh no, I didn't actually watch those children at the back, but they were the clever ones, so obviously they would have known it and I would tick it off, which is wrong because then I'm just showing bias, aren't I? So there is observation.
Yeah.
It's quite a handy way of doing it. Perhaps it's more common, I suppose, maybe in a number of primary subjects, perhaps more so than in secondary.
Yeah, that could work in secondary
Absolutely.
as well. What next?
So the next one is
Paul?
questioning. Questioning is a great way of gathering insights into what your pupils understand. You can use questions about the content that you've shared with them to probe how well they understand. You can ask them to explain, and by doing that, actually, you can pick up on any misconceptions there and deal with those straight away. So again, a really nice, quick, transparent way. An instantaneous way of getting feedback and helping to move them towards fluency and understanding. But again, some sort of limitations here. If your students are nervous or perhaps less confident with their verbal skills, then it's not going to be as useful for you. And again, difficulties with recording what students are saying. I often used to use a teaching assistant or a learning support assistant or some sort of recording, audio recording to try and capture that. But again, it can be time consuming depending how you're recording this. We're going to look at sort of recording data and analysing data in a future episode. Last couple of things, sort of written assignments. I'm going to group in kind of tests and written tasks here. These are a really good way of reinforcing learning, assessing their understanding. So it could be that you give them a question to write an essay on. It could be that you give them a closed procedure or some sort of standardized test. And they're really good. They can, help children to develop that critical thinking and really form their understanding before writing down. But again, similar with the verbal, actually, if your children have got, or your pupils rather, have got, less confidence in their writing ability, actually perhaps they're not going to show you as much of their understanding as if you were observing them or as if you were questioning them. Lastly, this idea of kind of quick quizzes. There's a whole load of research around coming back to learning in this regular, repeated way, and the idea being that the more that we access this information in the short-term memory, the more that we can strengthen the links in our long-term memory. But I suppose one of the key things to watch out for with this approach, if you're just using quick quizzing, actually you're not going to develop that fluency and that understanding and that really broad conceptualization of something and that level of fluency that Ofsted are looking for. That's a very quick overview.
Yeah. Do you think surely using all of those things would be effective.
Absolutely, and I think that's the crux of it. All of these have huge potential, but if you're just using one strategy, then you're not taking into account the fact that you've got this range of characters in your cohort who are going to respond differently and give you that insight into their understanding if you're just using one. And I don't know about you or our listeners, I've certainly worked with staff members who just prefer one method, just writing at the end of every lesson. Well, then you're not capturing what children know. Quick example on this, as RE lead, I had a member of staff say to me, well, I know the children will understand this because they've all written it in their books. And so I thought, hey, do you know what? I'm going to grab this little group of, Key Stage 2 children and just ask them about this concept verbally, and very limited understanding when it came to actually explaining it verbally to me, which just again shows the importance of using this range of strategies here. So there's lots of potential there for assessment, but we have to be aware there are also limitations to just using one strand here.
I think this is maybe for another podcast, Paul, but this idea that actually schools are so still very much the ecosystem of schools is that they are geared towards reading and writing. So in the end, it's going to have to come down to pupils putting their pen to paper and writing something. But I think you're absolutely right that using this spread of formative assessment methods before you get to that point is probably absolutely key to it all. We'd better wrap up, hadn't we? Because I think we're coming to the end. Thanks so much for your insights, Paul, and thanks for the research you've done. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We will be back. If you want to put any comments, if you're listening on a platform in which you can put comments, then do so somewhere in a box somewhere, and please like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. Bye for now.